This is my intro music. Welcome to the video. I hope you like it lots, so don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. Now let's react.
Hey, hi, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of An Anthropologist Looks at LoLCow Bus, Dark Anthropology Edition. Mwahaha. And if you're here for the first episode, which I highly recommend you go watch because you should watch it, we talk about comparing basically the LoLCow U and specifically LoLCow Bus to Jerry Springer and WWE. Yes, we do. And in that, I said we will do a second episode where we are looking at the characters. I mean, character archetypes that everybody here is playing. Mainly because I'm not doing a deep dive into these people. No, sir. That being said, I might go back over some of the stuff that I said in the first video, but I'm not going to go back over all of it, obviously. That video ran longer than I cared for it to run. This one will hopefully be a little shorter, just because we are just going to talk about the LCU characters that are on LoLCow Bus. Plus, we will be talking a little bit about some of the guests or hosts that have popped into LoLCow Bus for specific reasons. Plus, we're talking about Keemstar. All right, Keem is very important to this. So, all right, so I have notes if you see me gazing over here, and also I'm going to try to like pop some pictures up here just to kind of make things interesting. We're not watching anything. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel. Thank you to my subscribers. Thank you to my members. You guys rock. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting this channel. I've got to work on my intro. All right, let's get into this. So, LoLCow Bus and the wider LCU operate as a loose, soft-scripted humiliation theater. Yeah? We compare it to Jerry Springer and WWE. WWE not being humiliation theater, Jerry Springer definitely being humiliation theater. WWE being soft-scripted. All right? With Keemstar functioning as a Vince McMahon / Jerry Springer style booker / ringmaster here who likes to engineer conflict while maintaining plausible deniability. There's a concept that we need to keep in mind called Kayfabe, which is the idea that you know it's fake, I know it's fake, you know I know it's fake, but we're both going to but I'm going to suspend reality or suspend disbelief so that I can pretend like it's real, and you're just going to keep making up a story, and I'm going to pretend like it's real. This works in things like the WWE, which, hate to break it to you guys, isn't real. The stories in WWE and a lot of the wrestling isn't real. It's staged, it's scripted, it's rehearsed, it's a choreographed dance of violence, and we love it. Not so much true with the Jerry Springer show, though I do believe that there had been some allegations closer to the end of Jerry Springer where it's like, oh yeah, the fights are staged. Probably better staged the fights than having people actually up there brawling. Safer for everybody, in my opinion, but there we are. Keemstar, aka Keem, seems to have taken those concepts and merged them together, and I think somewhat successfully. LoLCow, the LCU, is a network of a variety of shows. If you go to their website that I just found out they have, I didn't know that. But there's a LoLCow Universe website. Now, I don't know how accurate this is because, again, the problem the problem with using Kayfabe and the LCU is Kayfabe only works if I trust you. Right? When I go to the movies, I know the movie's lying to me. I know it's not real. I know there aren't really 12-foot tall blue aliens that attach their feelers to a tree and upload their consciousness to whatever the hell that was supposed to be. I don't remember. I've only seen the first Avatar movie. I know that's not real, but I trust the movie. All right? I trust the movie to tell me a story. I trust the movie to lie to me, all right? I don't trust the LCU. And that causes the conflict. I can't suspend my belief long enough to sit back and enjoy the utter chaos, at least of the or of LoLCow Bus. I've not watched too many of the other LoLCow shows, except for when Amber was joining the LCU. I watched snippets of her coming in arc, but we'll talk about that because actually her slowly being brought into the LCU and the stunts and the crap that was pulled while Amber was being brought into the LCU is very WWE storyline esque. So you can clearly see that happening, and you can see Keem playing Vince McMahon here. I have a really bad cough. So if there's a lot of hard edits, hard breaks here, that's why. Anyway, going back to the LCU, they have a website. And apparently, according to them, there are 19 shows and 43 hosts across those 19 shows. Now, if you go to YouTube, I think I found 8. Either way, the LCU is a network of podcast-style live stream shows, and they have a multitude of hosts across these shows. Some of them seem to have a theme to them. Most of them just seem to be people show up and just scream at a screen, and that's it. All of them appear to have some elements of humiliation attached to them, and the running theme between all of the hosts is that they are apparently LoLCows of some variety. If you don't know what a LoLCow is, it's basically somebody who's just unaware that they are so incredibly cringe that they can be poked and prodded to produce reactions to that are funny. Right? Amber is a LoLCow. I'm sure Amber doesn't think she's a LoLCow, but she is. Roz is a LoLCow. Quirky Love Rose. I know she likes to state loud and clear she is not, but anyway. So, LoLCow Bus. I talked a little bit about what I know about the LoLCow Bus show, and what I know is just what I've picked up from mostly Scooter, just kind of talking on other shows or this show itself, and it's just kind of snippets here and there that I've just stitched together, so I can be wrong. But from what I understand, LoLCow Bus used to be a show that was just Scooter and Sweet Tea. Something happened between Scooter and Keem. Scooter got fired, quote unquote, and LoLCow Bus stopped. There was no more LoLCow Bus. That was roughly 3-ish months ago. And Amber joined the LCU at the endish of, well, Amber got demonetized at the endish of 2025, and Keem had been asking her to join the LCU for a little while before she even got demonetized. And so after she got demonetized, it just was a natural step for her to join the LCU and collect a paycheck in another way. And so now Amber has joined the LCU. According to Amber, she wanted to be on LoLCow Bus, or LoL Bus, or whatever the hell it's called. We're going to refer to it as Bus. Amber wanted to be on Bus because she wanted to work with Scooter and Sweet Tea, even though Scooter and Sweet Tea claim they had no idea who the hell she was before she joined their show. And now Amber is, quote unquote, driving the bus, and this is her show, and they are just her co-hosts, even though she does like jack nothing. And Scooter seems to be like the main host. He seems to be doing like the main host duties. And we'll talk about that. Right? Now, I've already in the first episode of this 3-part series, there will be another video after this. I've already talked about the comparisons between the LCU with Jerry Springer and with WWE. So I am going to assume that you have watched that video and just run with this. So if you get confused, I'm very sorry that you're going to have to go back and watch the first video, because I can't go over all of that a second time and still have time to talk about this. The first set of characters that I want to talk about are what we're going to call the core characters. And the chorest of the core characters is obviously going to be Keemstar. This is a screenshot of one of the thumbnails that was most recent on YouTube of Keemstar. I don't know. I don't know who this other woman is. It doesn't matter. This is Keemstar. Keemstar, as I said, his role within the LCU is, I don't know if he's the sole owner. I have it in my head that he might be part of a triad. But what is important here is Keemstar acts as the booker and the ringmaster of the shows within what appears to be the LCU. There is a Discord that routinely gets leaked. Mysteriously, it gets leaks all the time into the public sphere, even though you have to be a member to be in it. It just magically gets leaked, you guys. It's so weird. Anytime some kind of random drama happens, it's so strange. We'll talk about it. But Keemstar functions as that person that organizes the cows. They call themselves cows. I'm not just doing it to be mean. Organizes the cows. Again, he was the one that was trying to recruit Amber. Supposedly he was, I believe, the one trying to recruit Foodie. There was some talk about French Fry Girl coming on. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. I'm not going to go into it. But it seems like Keem is like the main recruiter. But most importantly, Keem also appears to be the one who butts into these shows, or at least with LoLCow Bus, seems to be the one who pops into the show, stirs crap up when it needs to be stirred, allegedly has sock accounts that he will go into the chat with to stir up the chat, or he will use his sock accounts to make super chat donations that will be read out by the text-to-speech bot, which we'll also talk about, because believe it or not, that is also a character. Now, one of the ways that Keem soft scripts his storylines, and I mean soft script in that we'll talk about some of the storylines, and we'll talk about how Keem kind of keeps them going when we talk about the various storylines. But some of the ways that Keem likes to frame things and keep storylines going is that he will frame humiliation tactics as growth or exposure or opportunities. Like, they have a event coming up here in a few months, I think, that they're going to call Fat Camp, where all of the fat hosts of the LCU, you don't have to be fat to be a cow, all of the LCU fat hosts are going to go to Fat Camp and they're going to lose weight. Is Keem a registered dietitian? No. Is Keem a registered whatever you have to, physical whatever? Not to my knowledge. But he's going to round them all up and make them all lose weight somehow. And Amber is included in this. Amber and Scooter are both included in Fat Camp. And Amber is already saying she's either not going to go to Fat Camp, or she's going to hang out with the skinny people when she goes to Fat Camp. We're already seeing storylines, and we're already seeing the conflict within these storylines taking shape. And again, Keem frames this as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for Amber to lose weight, much like he was framing Amber joining the LCU as an opportunity, right? So that's those are a couple of the ways that he frames things in order to keep people going. Another thing that he does, I mentioned the sock accounts, but if you watched the first episode, I'm not watching it again. I can't do it again. It was so much chaos. A lot of it was probably manufactured, but it was so much chaos because there's only so much you can do to control the audience. You can't control the audience. You can manipulate the audience and you can steer the audience, but the audience cannot be fully controlled, especially when it comes to the internet. Anyway, we'll talk about it. But the very first episode, there was so much chaos. And to add to the chaos, if you are aware of Amberlynn lore, this will all make sense to you. But to add to the lore, if you put aside the the interruptions that occurred on Scooter's end, because apparently Scooter was taking a vacation at a rival host's house. And while he was recording his very first episode, this host, both of the hosts, came into the room that he was recording in. One of them threw a washcloth at him, and the other one decided that she had angry beef with Amber, and so she came in and decided to scream at Amber. And yeah. But again, it felt very manufactured. Then Keem comes on, and Keem pops in a couple times just to kind of almost derail the conversation. Like when the conversation actually felt like it was almost functioning, Keem would pop in to basically derail it, as if they needed help. The audience was doing a good job of derailing things on their own. Fabulous job on their own. But another thing that Keem did was, if you are aware of Amber, you are aware of the rarity situation. Keem put in a sound that was a cat meowing. And I don't know what was triggering the cat meow. I am assuming it was every time somebody mentioned the cat rarity. There was a meowing noise, a cat meow noise that would play. And Keem was like, oh, I put that in. I didn't know that would be bad. Really? Anyway, so Keem himself is very much a troll, but he does these things to antagonize both his hosts and to egg on the audience, right? So as much as Keem is the organizer and the person who recruits the cows, he is also, once he has the shows going, he is also the one who basically antagonizes the hosts and the audience to keep them producing drama. And he also is the one who appears to manufacture rivalries between hosts, and also to put in, again, to soft script the storylines that seem to span across the various shows. Boop. Amber, all nice and front and center here, with all the filters. Filter Lynn here. Her role in all of this is the primary cow. She is Queen Cow. She likes to call herself Queen of Girl World, but she's also referred to herself as the bus driver. Amber is the primary cow here. She is also what we will refer to as the sacrificial centerpiece, and you will see why. She functions as the centerpiece of the show, and she leans into that. Many times she says, this show wouldn't exist if it wasn't for me. I'm the one that brought this show back. I'm the main host. I think a few times she was like, I don't need the money. I'm here because I want to be here. It's typical Amber shit. She is also the main draw for the majority of the audience, right? Now, we can say that they are hate watching, and that's fine, but the point is they are there to hate watch Amber. They're not there to hate watch Scooter. They're not there to hate watch Sweet Tea. And there doesn't seem to be very much support for either of the two of them. Now, later, we're still talking about the first episode. Later, because this has been out for a week and a half, or going on a week and a half at this point, the tone of the show, of the audience towards the show, will change. But we're just talking about the first couple episodes. Well, first episode so much. Right? Now, another thing that Amber represents here is the attempt at a redemption arc. And one of the things we mentioned in the first episode that I've been doing is that with the Jerry Springer show, it created the concept of confession without redemption. Because people would come on the show, they would confess, they would talk about their wrongs. And part of the Jerry Springer audience's job, function, is to judge. They judge the people who were up on the stage. The audience in the LCU is there to judge. And definitely they were there. Definitely the bus audience is there to judge. They are there to judge Amber. And that is something that the LCU leans into. They may say they're not, but the effect is the same. There is the need for confession without absolution, mostly for Amber. People demand that Amber tell them what actually happened. They demand that Amber admit XYZ. Even if she did, there would be no forgiveness. There would be no absolution. And this is rubbing off on her co-hosts because don't you know that she did XYZ? Don't you know that she did this? How can you support her when she yada, 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 right? And what that is setting her co-hosts up for is, again, setting them up for a moment that they will have to at some point say either, oh, I didn't know she did that, but she's my co-host, so... Or they're going to have to say something to the effect of, yeah, I knew she was doing that all along. So there's no absolution. There's no redemption for them, right? But that's the format for the show. That's the format for, it seems, the whole LCU. We will talk about Boogie later on, but Boogie is a prime example of this. I don't watch the LCU very much at all, really. But Boogie pops up here and there because Boogie is like King Cow. And Boogie will screw up to the point where even people will tell me about it. And I don't follow this shit. I'm following it now, but I didn't ever before. And it seems like every time Boogie does something, he never gets forgiven for it. But Keem and his buddy, who are supposed to be Boogie's friends, will always be like, oh, Boogie screwed up. We're gonna come up with a way for him to take accountability for it. We're gonna come up with a way for him to be punished for it. And he's gonna do that punishment, and that's gonna make everything better. And one of the things was like he was supposed to get the word liar tattooed on his face. These are bullies. But that's kind of the point. Like, there's no resolution. There's no forgiveness. Let's pretend, because he doesn't have the word liar tattooed on his face, let's pretend like he did actually get the word liar tattooed on his face. That's not absolution. That's not resolution. He now would, if it had actually happened, he would have to walk around for the rest of his life or until he had it removed with the word liar across his face. And now everyone who ever looked at him would see the word liar. And now you have to explain that. That's the red letter. That's not forgiveness, right? You see where I'm going with this? That seems that confession without forgiveness is the format of the LCU. Even though Keem and Scooter and I think Sweet Tea I heard her say this a few times. Yeah, they will say things like "your past doesn't matter," or Scooter said, "Coming to the LCU is where you come to grow. You're gonna grow as a person here. Keem's gonna help you change as a person." Sure, buddy. But yeah, going back to Amber as a character. Amber has other roles to play. She is currently the one supplying the emotional, I don't want to say labor, but it kind of is. Because Amber, currently, of the three hosts, is the one that confesses the most. She has the most trauma. She has the most turbulent. I think she's the only one with a relationship, but she has the most turbulent relationship. She has the worst mental health, even though I think her and Sweet Tea have the same diagnosis. She had the worst childhood, even though I think her and Sweetie had roughly the same growing up kind of a thing. But that's her job. That's her position here, is to be the one to be like, "Blah, trauma dump," right? That, to draw that fire, right? Because she's the one on this show that needs to, she's the one that needs to grow. She's the character that needs to grow. Even though you see Scooter's the one that always seems to be in trouble, which I find interesting. So Scooter's position is always like the damsel in distress, which I find that always interesting. Now, Amber also is not supposed to be playing a character. That's an accusation that gets thrown around with the LCU with a lot of their hosts, is they're playing a character. They're all playing characters. None of them are real. They're all playing characters. Amber isn't supposed to be playing a character because we all know who Amber is already. We knew who she was before she got on here. So as long as she just keeps staying her authentic self, Amber isn't playing a character. The problem is, Amber was accused of playing a character before she joined the LCU. People always accused Amber of being fake. Again, Kayfabe. We can't trust the LCU enough to suspend belief. So we can't Kayfabe. I don't think I used that word correctly, but anyway, we're doing it. But Amber, oddly enough, is supposed to be the authentic one. She is supposed to be sincere, and she is supposed to be the one who is not manipulating. But it's Amber. Now, Keem knows this about Amber. Anybody who has paid any attention to Amber knows she's known for being a liar. She's known for being manipulative. She's known for being not a great person. And people, her audience, don't like her. And Keem has recently admitted this on a now deleted live stream, but it's been archived. Keem has admitted that he is aware that the audience hates Amber. So he knows about this, which means even though Amber's position on this show is to be the authentic individual, the real individual, I think Keem actually brought her on here. Again, this goes back to the sacrificial centerpiece. Keem brought her on this show because he knows she is a controversial figure. He wants her on LoLCow. He wants her on Bus because he knows he will bring in hate views and he'll get hate donations. And he's right. So that's where the concept of her being the sacrificial centerpiece comes in. People aren't sending Superchats full of hate to Scooter and Sweet Tea. They're sending them to Amber. They're demanding Amber say, what the hell happened to Rarity? They're sending things like, why are you and Tommy back together? We'll talk about that storyline. That's Amber's position here. It's not really to be the primary cow. It's to be the sacrifice, the sacrificial cow. Scooter seems to be the handler. You guys remember The Undertaker? Scooter's the little guy who would bring out the urn of the Undertaker, and he'd walk around with the urn of the Undertaker, and he was the little guy that would yell at everybody, right, with the urn, and then summon the Undertaker. I'm not saying Amber's as cool as the Undertaker. I'm really not, because she's not. But Scooter's the guy that tries to mediate everything. Scooter's always trying to keep Amber happy. I think the kids call it glazing these days. I'm not going to tell you what I think about when I hear that word. I really wish the kids would quit using it because it's kind of gross. And I'm really hoping it's not what I'm thinking. But here we are. Scooter's role here is to be the handler of the sacrificial cow, mostly. His job is to just kind of mostly keep the show on track. He functions as the mediator between the hosts and the chat. a lot of times Scooter is the one who's reading the chat and interacting with the chat. Amber will read it mostly just to get pissed off. Scooter will read it in order to actually interact. And that's not just with the super chats. The super chats, if they're above a certain amount, usually it's $20, they get read off by a text to speech bot. And we'll talk about the text to speech bot. It is a character itself. But it, again, reads it out loud. So it's harder to ignore those. But Scooter will oftentimes read super chats that are below $20, and sometimes he'll just in general just read the chat. So that's Scooter's that's Scooter's function here. That mediation. But another function that Scooter has is he's the only man on the show, and Amber and Sweet Tea lead into that a lot. His job there a lot of times is to be the butt of a lot of jokes. He's the butt of jokes that Amber can't take. He is the one in the role of playing peacekeeper, especially for Amber. He will act as the whipping boy a lot of times. And it's interesting to me that one of the other things I've noticed is that Scooter seems to always be in trouble with Keem. Even though of the three hosts, Scooter doesn't seem to be volatile in any real way. So unless he's off screen being a complete raging asshole, which I suppose he could be, he and Keem always seem to have some kind of a disagreement or beef going on that just doesn't seem to make sense on camera. But anytime Keem comes on, Scooter's always like, "Oh God, it's Daddy Keem." I mean, I've heard him say it. And Keem's always like, "I'm disappointed in you, Scooter." It's a weird storyline that, again, doesn't really work, and it doesn't make sense. Maybe they really do have beef. It's really cold beef. It doesn't feel good. It's like bad beef. I don't know, man. It's weird. It doesn't feel real. But that's another role that Scooter seems to have, is like to be the secondary whipping boy. So, all right, that brings us over to Sweet Tea, the nice woman over here. You would think, being the other woman on here and being basically Amber's foil, that she would be like the softer female. She's not. Sweet Tea, a lot of times, again, both of these hosts, their main function is to do nothing but like pet and soothe Amber. That's because Amber really leans into her volatile BPD shit that she was pulling before she joined the LCU. So Sweet Tea, her role seems to be like the best friend, the friend role. She really seems to be leaning into the, "Oh girl, calm down" kind of a thing. She seems to try to reword super chats and things that come through that are particularly mean. She tries to shift the power balance on occasion. Sometimes she will side with Keem, sometimes she'll side with Amber. It just depends on where the loyalty needs to be in order for the drama to flow. She also is really funny. And I'm not saying that she's comic relief in that she's like a fool character, because she's not. That's more Scooter's position. Sweet Tea comes off as actually the only intellect in this goddamn show, with the exception of Keem. And she comes off as someone who is actually fairly intelligent, who's trying to play dumb, which is an interesting twist. So, but it's clear that she could outshine Amber, and she's desperately trying not to. And it's an interesting dynamic to watch because Sweet Tea is supposed to be a support position, not a main position, right? So you can definitely see that Sweet Tea used to at least be much higher on the food chain of this show than she currently is, right? Now, I want to talk a little bit about Boogie. I've brought him up a couple times, and this brings us back to storylines that Keem and Amber and Boogie all seem to be creating or trying to create, whether you want to believe them or not. Boogie is what we're going to call the legacy LoLCow. He is a veteran heel, if one will. I don't think Boogie has ever been a face anytime he's been on LoLCow. I don't know. I haven't watched it that long. I've never been a Boogie fan. But historically, if you follow Boogie's career all the way back, Boogie actually started off as a very popular, very funny, it was the 90s, you guys, non-ish problematic comedy skit kind of a guy. He did gaming and comedy and that kind of stuff. And then shit went to hell. And he firmly became a LoLCow. And now you basically know everything I know about Boogie. And then he joined LoLCow. And there's him and Keem, and the other dude's name is Wings. And Wings and Keem do nothing but humiliate the shit out of Boogie. And that's why I don't watch. But I know that Boogie has been the biggest draw to the LoLCow show forever. Again, if we pop over here to, they have their own leaderboard over here on LoLCow Live. You can look at things. But LoLCow Live is still the #1 show. That's Boogie's show with 2 other guys. I'm not digging that deep. If you know, you know. I'll figure it out later. LoLCow Bus, as you can see, is #2. This is the rivalry. This is the rivalry that's getting ready to start. So, what has started in the less than week and a half that LoLCow Bus has been around is that Keem has tried to start, or Amber and Boogie have tried to start a rivalry between each other, which would be a rivalry between the legacy cow of Boogie on LoLCow Live, their #1 show, and the new heel, Amber, the sacrificial cow, on the second show. And you can see how the tone over the time that we've been watching it, you can see how the tone of treatment towards Amber has slowly been shifting, because I predict that Keem wants to eventually treat Amber the way that he treats Boogie, in that constant humiliating kind of way, hence sacrificial cow. But to ramp this up, and since Boogie has been the darling of the LCU for so long, there is a rivalry, a conflict, if one will, brewing between Amber and Boogie. And I know it's manufactured because I've watched Amber for a very long time. And up until Amber joined the LCU, Amber has always been supportive of Boogie, including Boogie's very controversial faking of cancer. We're not going into it, but Amber was okay with it. But as soon as Amber joins the LCU, suddenly she's not okay with it anymore. And she wishes some very horrible things on Boogie. And they've been on screen a few times going back and forth with each other. Not screaming and yelling and throwing things, though Boogie is perfectly capable of that. But it's clear that this is a rivalry that is brewing between the brand new baby cow and the old cow. It's very convincing. Very, very convincing. Anyway, my point is, we have that rivalry brewing. When Amber first joined the LCU, she went on several other shows and basically just kind of doing the, hi, I'm Amber, introducing herself through other shows. And she had conflicts on those other shows with some of the other hosts. Most famously, though Roxy was not a host at the time, nor is she currently, Roxy is a past host on LoLCow, on the LCU. And Roxy was brought on to one of the shows that Amber was basically doing a tour on. And Roxy chewed Amber up one end and down the other. And it was very pleasant to watch. It's still very pleasant to watch. But Roxy has since apparently walked that back. See what I'm saying about you can't trust any of this. And Amber also, on another show, well, maybe it was the same show. Anyway, on a different episode, maybe it was the same episode. Anyway, there was another host that Amber apparently decided to start beef with. What was her name? I don't remember. Another female host. Now, remember I said in the very first episode, Scooter was at another set of hosts' house for vacation. I'm sure he was on vacation. I don't know. But that female host of that show decided that she was going to interrupt because she just had to scream at Amber, as you do. That host was briefly on one of the other shows that Amber was doing her Hi, I'm Amber tour. And after she left the show, Amber says, I never really liked her anyway. So that rivalry was broadcast. And then we have this interrupting your first show screaming match. At the end of this show, the very first show, there's a thing you can do with live shows where you can send your audience to another live. Basically, I think on Twitch they call it like a raid. So you can send your viewers to another live so that they can continue to watch something. It's a good move. And when you have something like a network like this, it's a smart move to do. But interestingly enough, the show that they had to send their audience to after their debut show, the show that they had to send their audience to was the show that the two hosts that kept interrupting their show, that was their show. Interesting, huh? Very strange. So the people that kept coming in and interrupting your show, that's the show that you had to go and give your audience to once your show was over with? Huh. It's almost like you were advertising for them. Weird. Now, hang on. The final and most important character that I need to talk about is the audience, chat, and TTS. Much like with WWE and with Jerry Springer, the audience is an important character in the story because the audience participates with the hosts, with the actors. Now, it is different in that, unlike WWE and Jerry Springer, we are not physically in the room with the show that's occurring. So they can't hear us, yeah, boo. They can't see us holding up our signs. But that's where chat comes in. And that's where the TTS comes in. The LCU does filter chat out. They will filter out people who are not members. And they call those people the grays because your name is gray. It's grayed out because you're not a member. Once you become a member, you get a color, your name changes color, and you get a little star or something stupid. Anyway, the point is, those people, members, are allowed to chat. However, the hosts tend to ignore the chat. So 90% of the time, the chat is chatting with itself. That is still participation. The audience is still participating with itself, which is important because the audience can still influence itself, right? It can still converse amongst itself. It can still argue with itself, and it will, But there is a function called a super chat. And a super chat or a super sticker, that's also a thing, can be purchased for money. And what those things will do, I know I'm explaining this to people who don't know. Listen to me. I'm trying to make this crystal clear for people who have never done this before in their lives. A super chat will typically pop up, and depending on how much you spend, it will be a certain color, and it will be bigger and more solid and theoretically easier to see. Some of us are blind. Anyway, if you're not paying attention to the chat, you will still miss those. And LoLCow uses, I believe, Streamlab. I could be wrong, but they use a bot that does text to speech, TTS. And if you donate, if you pay $20 or more, usually, it will read your super chat out loud. And that is hard to ignore. So that is the way that the chat, aka the audience, is able to fully participate, mostly, with the hosts. And when you have an audience that you have built on hate, like the audience that Keemstar has built for LoLCow Bus, because again, people are hate watching for Amber. They're not love watching for Scooter and Sweet Tea. Maybe there's a handful of people who are, but the majority of the audience are there because they don't like Amber. Right? So when you have an audience that's built on hate, which you do, and they have the ability to purchase a conversation interrupting super chat, I have better things to do with $20, but some people don't. They will do that, and they will weaponize the TTS, which they did and continue to do. Now, again, the show's been on for a week and a half at this point, and I will say that the last few episodes that I have watched have been far more chill, if not straight up boring, than the first couple episodes. But again, that's because that hate energy can only go for so long, right? The audience is going to get bored. They're going to move on. It's just how it is. That intense emotion just cannot sustain itself. But in the beginning, people were using the TTS to interrupt the conversation, to humiliate Amber, to maintain a collective memory within the chat, which clearly was there. And again, in general, weaponize the chat itself. And I say that in that since it was read out loud, and Amber has the attention span of a goldfish, every time one of those would be read out loud, Amber would get off track, which would make Scooter have to vamp, and try to get everybody back on track. And Sweet Tea, bless her heart, would laugh. And Amber's like, "Are you laughing at me?" And Sweet Tea's like, "No." Got what your role was. They would weaponize it in a way that they would demand things of Amber. They would demand explanations for things. And you're never going to get answers for those kind of things. But the things that people are asking Amber, at least in those first couple episodes, we're never going to get answers for. But that goes on to the collective memory. People were asking her about Rarity. They were asking her about the washcloths. Again, they were asking her about Tommy and feederism and other things that are, in general, core Amberverse lore, right? And again, yes, it reminds Amber and it humiliates Amber, but it also reinforces that memory within the core audience that was collected there that day, right? Weaponizing it is different because, as I mentioned in the first video, the TTS, when it sees an emoji, reads out the name of the emoji, And a couple few people who are still on my shit list typed out, I'm not exaggerating, 20, just a string of 20 emojis. And there's still somebody in my chat that pops up and they're just like cat face emoji. And so we got to sit there for 20 minutes listening to cat face emoji, cat face emoji, cat face emoji. Oh, anyway. It wasn't funny. It's funny to you, but it wasn't funny to the rest of us. So that's the chat's job, is to participate, to, well, in this case, weaponize the chat, and to remind the hosts, of what their roles are. And I know that sounds weird, but by humiliating Amber, by using the collective memory around core Amberverse lore, we're reminding Amber of her position there, right? Again, going back to the sacrificial cow, right, that Keem has made of her. I talked about consent laundering in the first video. The whole concept of they agreed to be here, they're getting paid, they can leave at any time. But it's not quite that simple, because that when I say the word consent laundering and then read off those statements, what it's really doing is removing responsibility from, well, Keem and the rest of us for our actions towards the hosts. Again, remember, people were weaponizing the chat. They were demanding things of Amber. They were humiliating Amber. They were bringing shit up that they were sure would hurt Amber emotionally, right? Keem himself bringing up shit that he knew would emotionally hurt Amber, creating storylines that are conflict centered. There's later on in the shows, he's demanding she go to fat camp, knowing that she's delicate about her weight. But she wants to be there, right? She agreed to be there. She's getting paid for it. She can leave, right? I'm just saying. She can leave at any time. She wants to be there. Maybe it's true or not, but sometimes we have to stop and listen to ourselves. Anyway, and I think I went over confession without absolution, in that these shows encourage, I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but these shows encourage, especially with Amber, the concept of her confessing or agreeing to a betterment policy, but yet it's never good enough. I went over that with Boogie, I think, with the liar tattoo. My shows are these episodes are blurring together. I need to stop now. All right, if you've made it this far in the show, go ahead and put a, I don't know, what did I have you do last time? Just put a cow. Let's just be easy. Just put a cow down. Don't make me think about this. Put a cow down in the comment section. Let me know what you guys are thinking. If you're going to leave a comment or a question, please use a timestamp so I know what I was talking about, because as I've demonstrated, my brain doesn't work. So let me know what you guys think. Use a timestamp on your comments. I'd love to talk about this with you guys. And thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel. Thank you to my subscribers. Thank you to my members. You guys rock. Thank you to everybody who's going to hit the thumbs up button. And that's all I've got for you guys. So I will be doing a third one of these where we will be mashing this all into the actual 8 principles of Dark Anthropology, as we do. And that'll be the end of this Dark Anthropology thing. And we will just simply be reacting to this crap from here on out. Because, well, unless something else hits my interest. But this is the angle I've decided to take for these. The Jerry Springer WWE angle. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. And I will see everybody in the next video. Bye!
This is my outro music. You can't copyright strike me because it's just me singing. This is my outro music. Thank you for watching. See you next time.